And what this practice of gratitude pulls in is it pulls you into today, right? It pulls you into what was good about today. Yes, there's a lot of shitty things, right? But there is a lot of good as well. And less from the woo-woo side of things and more from the, when we're thinking about our brain, right? When we're constantly stressed, which we all are, right? What they're finding is the science is showing that you need 7 things. Some people say 5, but I've seen more of the science saying 7. 7 positive things to offset 1 negative thing.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Como Somos. At Somos, we help you understand what's going on in your body by analyzing your blood, data, and other symptoms. Then we connect the dots so that you can take back the control of your own health. As part of that mission, we created this podcast, Como Somos, where we interview experts to understand how the human body really works. In this episode, we chat with Dasha Maximov, who is the founder and CEO of WhealthCo, an online community focused on educating women about their bodies and minds. After moving from management consulting into a master's for neuroscience, Dasha experienced a brain injury that left her with chronic symptoms. And when she couldn't find a solution after seeking multiple doctors and specialists, Dasha took her health into her own hands and began to biohack her mind and body. Apart from leading WealthCo, Dasha also offers an epic online biohacking course for women and hosts retreats in the beautiful Dominican Republic, which is where she currently lives. Hey Dasha, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for doing this again. And I'm super excited to talk to you today. A lot of what we're trying to get accomplished with this podcast is kind of talk about what might be really complicated health topics in a way that's easy to understand for anyone, so that they have kind of these tools and they can take back the control of their health.
Thank you so much, Christina. I'm excited to chat with you and your listeners.
Cool. So I thought we could just kind of break the ice, introducing you to our listeners. What I'm curious about is kind of hearing your story, whatever you'd like to share, how you went from kind of management consulting, doing these big mergers and acquisitions, transactions, to biohacking and everything that you do today.
Yeah, I will try and keep it short because it's a twisting and winding set of events. Let's see. I was a management consultant for 9 years. My degree was in economics and decision science, so very different from where I am today. I ended up having an ulcer at age 23. I left management consulting for a sabbatical to go to India to apprentice to become an Ayurvedic doctor. I thought that might be my path and ended up not going into Ayurveda or continuing down that path. Rather, I'm still interested in it, but I created a health initiative within the company, the consulting company that I've been working in, which is now global. And then I ended up finally leaving consulting to get my master's in neuroscience. So I left the consulting world wanting to get more into health, more into brain health, specifically because I had already had 5 concussions. I had always been kind of this daredevil, working like crazy. And then I need to get out my cortisol, get out that stress. And so skiing, mountain biking, wakeboarding, I mean, you name it, I smashed my head quite a bit. And so interest in neuroscience was obviously how can I really heal my brain, and why is my brain doing the things that it's doing, right? i.e., I didn't have long-term memory. And while I was doing my master's, unfortunately, I hit my head again. And so I had to stop the master's. And that's where I entered this world of biohacking. And so biohacking became a beautiful space for me because I had gone to a number of doctors. They had said, my MRIs are fine. You're fine. And my chronic headaches and fatigue and depression and anxiety and low energy and even worse memory showed that I really wasn't fine, right? And so biohacking opened up this space of saying, okay, do this N of 1 experiment. If you go back to statistics, right? N of 1 equals not an N of 100, not 100 people that we're looking at, but what works for you. So what worked for me? And so then I put my feet, once I had kind of healed my brain and gotten back to my energy using a number of these different biohacking tools that we'll probably be talking about today, I ended up saying, how can I give this to more people? I need to share this. And that's where we had a conference. I was the COO for a summit in London. And that was amazing. I got to really understand the industry more and more. And now I've shifted away from that to really focus in on women. And I think that's what we'll be talking about today as well with WhealthCo. So WhealthCo stands for Women's Health Community. And we've specifically decided to remove the word biohacking because I find the word biohacking to be a little scary. But WealthCo is specifically biohacking for women, right? Health optimization for women, personalized health for women. And the reason that we're really focusing on women is because when we think about health, everything, and I mean everything, is going to be different between men and women. Why? Hormones dictate everything. So my hormones are going to dictate what I want to eat, what's my energy level, what's my confidence level, right? What's my libido? All of these things are going to be dictated by my hormones. And so if I don't think about health as a woman, then there's no way that I can optimize my health. So WealthCo is now all about, we do retreats down here in the Dominican Republic, which is where I live, where if maybe you hear in the background a horse neighing, that's
that was some kind of tropical bird. Yeah.
Yeah. We have tropical birds. We have a bunch of birds. We have horses. We have a bunch of things here. But we have retreats down here in Dominican Republic. And also, if people can't come to the retreats, we have an online course that is specifically dedicated for women's health and a community as well. So that's I tried to make it a short version of the story.
Amazing. No, that's beautiful. And I kind of want to add some context and color to this, kind of looking back, why we have less information about women in clinical studies. And even just talking about the industry of biohacking today, the big names are Dave Asprey, Andrew Huberman, Ben Greenfield. But why aren't there kind of bigger names that are women? And I'm curious to kind of get your opinion on this as to why, maybe looking back in history. I know a bit of the history, but I want to kind of set a bit of context for our listeners. So kind of historically, why do you think there's less information in terms of clinical trials and experimentation on women?
So it wasn't, one of the things I find fascinating is when we think about clinical trials, it took us as women a long time to get included in these trials, which we need to look at history as what was the information that was able and available to us then as opposed to now, right? So back in the day, it was thought that if a woman of childbearing age was included in a trial, then that potentially could be detrimental to the child. So good intentions, not so great for us over the time of science. And so women, for the longest of times, up until I think it was like the 1977, were banned from clinical trials. Banned, right? So if we're thinking about trials on breast cancer, which predominantly is going to be affecting women, many of the trials were actually done on men, right? When we're thinking about pharmaceutical drugs, which drugs go through our bodies very differently than they do in men. And many of these trials were done only on men. So a case in point, which people can Google and they can search for it, is Ambien. So Ambien had been, again, only trialed on men. And yet what they found once the drug was already on the market was that women were starting to be so drowsy the next day because that Ambien, that same dosage that men and women were taking together, like both men and women were taking the same dosage, women were ending up being drowsy. They were driving their cars to work. They were getting into car accidents in the morning, right? So we need to now, so we're starting, the world has changed to realize that we truly are very different and that we need to be included in clinical trials. Because if we're thinking about pharmaceutical drugs, that we're thinking about any sort of dosage, any sort of things, we need to really differentiate between what is a man going to need and what is a woman going to need, even if they are the same age, same ethnicity, same genetic profile, all of that. I think the answer to your question about the biohacking space and why in the space today in biohacking it's predominantly men is because that's who was going and pushing the envelope forward, right? So Dave Asprey, incredible, right? Incredible that he was the guy, the father of biohacking in air quotes, right? He's the one that coined the term. He's an incredible marketer. He's a great aggregator of information. He was doing a lot of these initial experiments on himself, right? And historically, it's been easier for men to quantify these things, these experiments. So biohacking ultimately came out of the space, which is called quantified self. And so in the quantified self area, many of those folks were men, right? Now, fast forward now, yes, exactly the names that you had mentioned, the Andrew Huberman, the Dave Asprey, the Ben Greenfield, many of them are men. But we're starting to see a shift, and women are starting to come into the fold as well. We have people who are all the women that I would recommend checking out are on our website and in the course, right? These are the women who are really starting to hone in and say, okay, what should I be doing differently as a woman versus a man? The challenge, though, is that women are difficult, in air quotes, to study, right? And so we even today, when we're thinking about clinical trials, even though we are now allowed in clinical trials, it is difficult for a researcher to continue to do trials on us. Because if you think about it, right, you're given a grant. I'm a PhD student. Yes, I just got a grant. I'm going to try this new, let's take HRV, for example, right? I want to try this protocol on your heart rate variability, and I want to see how is this going to impact. Well, if I don't know whether it's going to impact, I need to cast a wide net. And I need to say, okay, is this going to work on anybody? So before I'm able to hone in and say, is this going to improve HRV for women between the ages of 35 to 45, or women who are after having a child, for example, or women who are postmenopausal, I first need to cast the net really wide. I need to include all of both men and women, all ages. And then later on, I can hone in. But I think what we're seeing now is because of wearables and because of communities where women are starting to say, hey, this is my N of one, this is my N of one. And so there's a bunch of N of ones that are starting to get aggregated. Now we're starting to see information on women's biohacking come more to the forefront, not through double-blind placebo-controlled tests at Johns Hopkins and universities, but more so on the citizen science front.
Yeah, it's empowering, and it's also, on the one hand, going through the history, it's pretty surprising that only in the 90s the FDA allowed women to participate in clinical trials again, so of childbearing age. But yeah, crazy to think about, and really empowering that now we have these devices to give us feedback, to have these kind of N of one experiments.
And I think too, from a cultural perspective, one of the things that I've kind of noticed or thought about is that the Me Too movement really helped us in this space as well, right? And what I mean by that is what happened to provoke the Me Too movement is awful, right? But ultimately, what it resulted in was women starting to use their voice and starting to say, no, I want to talk to my fellow women. And I think that's one of the things that we as women are so powerful when we put our egos aside, put our cattiness aside, put our comparison aside, and we really bond together, right? We have this beautiful sisterhood and support network, which is available to us if we are in a good place, right? If we are in a good place and saying, yeah, I'm not going to compare myself and say, oh, well, she looks prettier, and judge other women, right? I'm going to put that aside and say, I'm going to support her. And so I think when we're even thinking about, from the Me Too side of things into health, now all of a sudden we have people like Angelina Jolie, right? Who she saw her genetic profile. She saw her potential to have breast cancer. She decided to have a mastectomy. She spoke about it wildly, right? Openly.
She's very open about it, yeah.
Exactly. And then other women said, wait, this is incredible. She's talking about her health and she's being so brash, like not brash, but open about it, right? And in choosing this option And I also can speak my voice. I also can share my experience, right? So no longer is it when people talk about breast cancer as it was when my mom had breast cancer, and even in the generation before, which was hush hush and don't tell anybody and we're scared. It's, I just got this diagnosis. Who's going to help me? Who's in my support network? Let's go. I need you, right?
And going into this kind of new era, I guess, of health optimization, N of one experimentation, kind of what are we now seeing between the differences, biohacking or health optimization, whatever we want to use, between men and women? Like when we talk about, fasting or nutrition or training, breath work.
For sure. That is a conversation that could last 15 weeks, which is the course. Not that I'm trying to plug the course, but I think, if you want to get into the details, definitely sign up, because the things that I'm going to speak about are me passing them down from the experts that I've spoken with, right? And so just kind of some snippets that come to mind. Fasting, well, before I even get into the details, it all starts with the hormones, right? So for women, we need to think of ourselves very differently because of our hormones, because of our cycle, right? 28-day plus minus, every cycle is different, but we need to think about that cycle and how we change throughout the course of the month. And so because our hormones dictate how we feel, how we act, how we sleep, our temperature, right? Everything that we do with respect to optimizing our health is different. So that includes fasting. So for fasting, intermittent fasting, incredible, right? Wonderful tool for us. However, we as women, we should not be doing a 3-day fast, a 5-day fast, a prolonged fast at all points throughout the cycle. The week before you're menstruating, for example, big no-no, right? That's the time that Dr. Mindy Peltz would say, nope, if you're doing a long-term fast, then you're going to be potentially giving your body improper signals and telling your body, ooh, you're not safe. And so it may make changes to your cycle for the following month, right? There are things from a breath perspective, right? What I just actually spoke with our expert, Georgie Lawler, who talks about breath work for women, right? We as women, we have a different lung capacity through different parts of our cycle. Dr. Stacy Sims talks about how a lot of women, for example, they'll say, okay, well, my best PRP, my best record is actually during my menstruation or immediately after, right? So if you're thinking about something like that, it's saying, okay, well, if I have a race, great. I'm going to do that the week after my cycle, right? I'm going to have that much extra energy. I'm going to have greater capacity to really push for it, right? And I can do it then. And so then if we even pull back from the physical side of things and more into the cognitive and the emotional side of things, we as women, we are very, very different, right? And so every single week. And so if we start, a lot of women are in business right now. And if we start thinking about that, we can tap into different components from a neuroscience standpoint. We can tap into different components of our brains depending on where we are in our cycle. So for example, there are weeks in your cycle where the details, they are just not going to happen for you, right? Just leave me alone. My brain's a fog. My brain's a mess. I can't think about this. I'm not there, right? And again, the literature suggests one thing, but sometimes we as women, we're different, right? So your experience can be very different from mine. And so you have to figure out what that week looks like. And in that week, okay, well, you're not going to be in the details, but what could you be doing? You could be doing, especially as a business owner, you could be doing things that are more strategic, more big picture thinking, more, okay, well, are we going in the right trajectory? Is this like, what could we be focusing on this month? And so because this comes in a monthly cycle, it actually lends itself to be quite nice for a business because you get to have that time in the month that you can pull away, pull up, and then refocus on where do I really want this business going this month? strategically.
And I don't think a lot of women really realize, myself included, up until recently, how different we are, 4 times a month. And it's, on the one hand, it's really a superpower if we're able to tap into that.
For anyone who might be listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, right? I didn't know about this until a couple of years ago, and that's ridiculous. And that we need to change as well for our younger ones in society. But we as women, right? We think about it as, okay, you've got your menstrual bleed, right? That when the first day of menstruation, that is day 1, right? And so then most of us have a cycle that is 28 days plus or minus. So if if you have a 26-day cycle, don't worry about it. That's fine. That's normal. That's you, right? So it might be 31 days, right? So if you're looking on these apps, oftentimes they'll say 28 days. So, but no, again, it's plus minus. So in that cycle, so day 1 is your bleed. Day 28 is the last day of your cycle until you bleed again, right? So that's the cycle. Now, in between those day 1 to day 28, we have what people will say 2 phases, which is a follicular and a luteal phase. So 2 main phases. And then in those phases, we have menstruation and ovulation. So when people say 4 cycles, but then they get confused with 2, that's where the confusion comes in, right? It's you ultimately have a follicular phase, which starts at day 1. It goes until ovulation. And then after that, you have a luteal phase. So follicular starts with menstruation. That's usually 3 to 5 days. Following is the remainder of your follicular phase. Then you have ovulation somewhere in your mid-cycle. That's when an egg is kind of drops, right? And can be fertilized. That's when you can potentially get pregnant or not. And then if you don't get pregnant during the second part of your cycle, during the last 14 to 28 days, let's say, that's your luteal phase. And that's where your body is either saying, hooray, we're pregnant, or hooray, we're not pregnant, depending on how you feel, right? So, but we as women, again, it's these 4 individual phases, the menstruation, luteal, menstruation, follicular, ovulation, luteal, where we need to be thinking about things differently, even to the extent that we need to be thinking about foods differently. There's also, and I'll pause after this, but there's one thing that comes to mind quite a bit, and it's an old tradition of seed cycling. And this is taking in and eating specific seeds, depending on where you are in the cycle, to regulate your cycle, right? And there's companies that are now coming out, which would have a packet that makes it really easy for you. So instead of you saying, okay, here's my sesame seed and here's my flax seed and all that kind of stuff, it's already pre-done for you. So all you have to do is take a spoonful and throw it into your smoothie in the morning.
I think I heard you mention having kind of a monthly report card, whereas, we have this one, this report card that comes tell us how we are, whereas, men don't overtly have something to that extent that kind of shows how we're doing health-wise. And I think that's also just kind of a fascinating checkpoint for women.
Yeah, and it's a mindset shift, right? When I was first in consulting, and if you had told me your cycle is the best thing ever and it's a magical report card, I would have been like, yeah, right. No, it's really annoying because I'm in a boy's world and I have to kind of not hide it, but I have to, when I go to the bathroom, like, I don't want everybody to see me with tampons or anything like, it's an annoyance, right? And fast forward to today, when I realized that if we as women are the ones that educate, right? We are the mothers, we are the curators, the creators. And so it's also on us to educate not only our daughters, but also the men in society as well. And so I remember when I really started getting into this and I started having this conversation with some of the men in the office, and we pulled it away from it's icky and it's disgusting, it's blood, and no, we shifted it into, hey, isn't this fascinating? And wouldn't you want to learn more about this? Because if you knew this about your partner, you could foresee some of these emotional changes, or whether she needs space, or whether she needs something else, and how you can support her to be a better partner, right? And so I think it's up to us to realize that it is a superpower. If men had this had this report card, you better believe that all of society would be like, oh yeah, so what day are you on? Like, I'm on day this, I'm on day that, right? Whereas with women, like, women should know what day they're on. That it should be, when we're thinking about optimizing health, that is the first thing I tell people. And I say, if you don't know what day of your cycle you're on, that's the first thing we need to fix. We need to get you aware of where you're at, because then you're going to, instead of you being like, why did I just eat that whole entire chocolate bar? You're going to be like, oh, I know why I ate that chocolate bar, because my body needs the magnesium and I'm supporting my body. This is good. Now, don't reach for the Hershey's, reach for a good dark chocolate, right? But you can change the mindset that this is actually something truly brilliant and truly incredible and free.
Yeah. And also not just the people that we work with, but, trainers, for example, when we go to the gym, just knowing, because I'm in this phase, then I can, possibly grow more muscle, or maybe I should do something a bit more restorative as opposed to strength training.
I do see that with women, in that we're constantly trying to push. And that may be one of our downfalls, right? Because we always want to be givers. We always want to be, and now that we're mothers and partners and business owners and what all these different roles that we want to play, and we should be playing them. But if we're constantly pushing on the gas pedal all the time, we're bound to have a health problem at some point. It's impossible. It is absolutely impossible for you not to be able to continue going like that forever, right? And so when you've had your health story, I've had mine, right? It is, in my case, I had an ulcer when I was 23. You're not supposed to have an ulcer when you're 23. It's just not supposed to happen. And we see these things with women not being fertile, women having PCOS or endometriosis or thyroid problems, right? Having cancer. All of these diseases are not only diseases, and this is where it's the bridging of kind of the latest advances of health and looking back into Chinese medicine, looking back into Ayurveda to say, okay, well, thyroid problems weren't always that common before. And thyroid problems in Chinese medicine are linked to you not speaking your voice, right? So if you have Hashimoto's, if you have a hyperthyroid or hypothyroid, are you not using your voice? Is it that you're always in work mode and just go, go, go? Okay, I'm going to do what I'm told. And that's that. And maybe that serves you for a period of time. But if we're constantly going, rushing, never taking a break, never reading and understanding the wisdom that this body is giving us of have a cycle. You've been given a cycle. And so you have your ups, you have your downs, you have your peaks, you have your valleys, right? The sooner that we as women start to realize that, the better that we're going to be, the healthier we're going to be, the more energy that we're going to have to give in those times of go, go, go.
I love that. And maybe we can just touch a little bit more on your course and kind of what you're doing in WealthCo, the women's health community.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for teeing that up. I appreciate it. It came about because I didn't see anything in the biohacking space or the health optimization space or the personalized health, whatever term we want to use. I didn't see anything specific to women. And so I really wanted to create a course, and I wanted the course to be taught by the experts. I'm very, very much onto this because in the sense that I think there is book knowledge, which is great. There is N of one knowledge, also great, but that cannot be substituted for truly being a healer and seeing trends and seeing people get better over time, because that is your specialty. And so when I was kind of creating and fantasizing about this course, I knew that it was going to have to be taught by others. I was not going to teach it. I would curate it, but I would not teach it. So yes, I am a health coach. Yes, I read thyroid panels and hormone panels. Yes, I can do that. But no, you are learning from Dr. Felice Gersh, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Dr. Mindy Peltz, Dr. Jessica Petras, Dr. Stephanie Canestraro. These are people who have in their speciality, been working with women for decades, right? And so the topics that are taught are things that people who want to be biohacking, want to be in this space, want to learn about, right? But they need to learn about it differently as a woman versus a man, right? So for example, protein. How much protein should you be taking versus your husband, right? Dr. Gabrielle Lyon will talk to us about that. How should you be working out versus your husband? Kara will be talking to us about that. Fasting, ice bathing, right? Even ice bathing. That's something that's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to jump into a tub. No, you won't. Right? Because we as women, we don't need it to be as cold and we don't need to stay in the water for as long. And so the course, my intention with the course was to kind of give a 101 on health and hit the topics that really would be a game changer for women, right? And also it was specifically intended to be for women who are busy and who probably don't identify themselves as biohackers in air quotes, right? This is primarily for women who are just saying, I'm a mom and I have a couple of kids or one kid and I don't have time. I'm feeling like I have low energy. My hair is falling out. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. My doctor is telling me everything's fine. What do I do? Right? Or it might be for an entrepreneur who, again, she is loading herself up with caffeine or just up in first thing in the morning, down last at night, trying to be there for her organization, trying to be there for her workers, but she is exhausted and she's burnt out and she's looking for an answer. And so she doesn't have time to be listening to all these podcasts. But with the course, the intention here is it's only a couple of hours a week, i.e., this can be done while you are in commute. This can be done listening in the shower. This can be done, the minimum amount of time is 3 hours. And that includes the podcast, the course, like the 1 hour course, and then there's a live Ask Me Anything. So every single week, you get a chance to ask the doctor your questions. No medical advice is given. However, if you have a specific question on, hey, I really wanted to do this, I want to get into fasting, but I'm petrified of it. Where do I start? Right? You can ask Dr. Mindy Pell.
Amazing. I resonate with a few of those things you mentioned, and I can't wait to start the course in March. So we'll include a link for sure in the show notes for that. And Dasha, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this. I feel like I can geek out with you with biohacks or upgrades. Kind of with everything that you've learned and with organizing this course, kind of what are the upgrades or biohacks that you like, your favorite ones, and which ones have you kind of integrated into your life? And then I want to ask you kind of about glucose monitoring.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say that one. Okay, so I'll have a question back for you. Technology or non-technology biohacks? What are we talking here?
Both. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Non-technology, I would say gratitude. That has been huge for me because it seems simple and people talk about gratitude journals. Gratitude journals do not work for me personally. But what does work for me is when I go to bed at night, I will always think back on the day and I will think about what I was grateful for in the day. 3 things, right? And if you have a partner, it's actually a really nice exercise to ask him or her, right? What were you grateful for today? Because it's really cute and curious what they may be grateful for, which you didn't even think twice about, right? And it's curious. Then you start to even learn a little bit more about them, and which is lovely. But for me, I find that it's great because in the hustle and bustle, right? We are always going, and we often are thinking way too much in the future or way too much in the past. And what this practice of gratitude pulls in is it pulls you into today, right? It pulls you into what was good about today. Yes, there's a lot of shitty things, right? But there is a lot of good as well. And less from the woo-woo side of things and more from the, when we're thinking about our brain, right? When we're constantly stressed, which we all are, right? What they're finding is the science is showing that you need 7 things. Some people say 5, but I've seen more of the science saying 7. 7 positive things to offset 1 negative thing, right? And so it doesn't have to, and that's the thing. What's crazy about that is it doesn't have to be huge. So you could have a huge negative thing, and if you just have a bunch of little tiny 7 positive things, then you'll offset it, right? So one of my gratitudes for today is going to be, hey, I got a chance to speak with you, even though we had a little bit of a on my end, a delay, right? And so that's a little thing, but it's going to offset all of the negative news, the negativity, which we all have. Like, we've got that monkey mind that just causes us to be negative for no reason, right? Oh, they said this, or oh, this social media post, or this, whatever it is. 7 little tiny things. So I've started coining the term, people talk about microaggressions. I have started looking for micro joys, right? And so for me, for example, one of my micro joys is in the morning, if you're a bulletproof coffee person, or if you like I don't do the bulletproof thing, but I love to add lion's mane and collagen. And, I do add a whole bunch of concoction into my coffee. And so it froths it up. Right. And so when I pour the coffee in at I try and get it to the very top of the mug. And if I get it to the top of the mug, I'm like, yes, micro joy. Right. So it's something stupid and small, and it makes me happy. And yeah, so I would say gratitude is one of them. Getting out and moving, that is huge. And all of us as biohackers don't do enough of it. We all take way too many supplements. We talk about health and we don't move enough. And movement and shaking things out and doing traumatic release exercises, I'm starting to do them a couple times a week, because you can shake stress out, right? And it's free and it's easy and it doesn't take a long time. And if you can't do that, if you don't want to do that, do some squats, right? There's a lot of biohacks that I think seem to be very technological or expensive, and they don't have to be, right? The whole intention of biohacking is to get back to the basics, right? Why do we have red lights? Because we use this in front of a fire and we are trying to mimic the sunset, right? Why are we doing cryo and cold plunges? Because we used to jump into the lake or into the river when it was cold, right? So getting back to that basics. I think from a technology standpoint, the first one would be an Oura Ring or a BioStrap or some sort of a sleep tracker. Because if you don't have your sleep down, then everything else is going to be not so good, right? And that those trackers can help. That being said, I'm not wearing any of them, right? Because I do feel that once you have your sleep under order, and if you are not doing a specific test, then the technology starts to hinder us, right? And we start saying, oh, I'm a 93 today, where I was a 95 yesterday. Like, big deal, right? And so for me, it's use the technology until it makes you open up your intuition, and then you may not need the technology as much anymore, right? And then the second technology, which we'll kind of get into now, is the continuous glucose monitor. I think that thing is amazing, and anybody in this space needs to try it. It is worth the expense. It is an incredible experiment, and it's super fun.
Amazing. So I'm interested in this topic because recently, Somos, we just launched continuous glucose monitoring in one of our plans. And I know you've experimented quite a bit with it. What would you say to someone that doesn't know what it's about and maybe thinks these things are only for diabetics, or why is it good to use, and for anyone that's looking to improve their metabolic health? How does it help?
Yeah. So we have an epidemic: obesity, diabetes, inflammation, and many of us are going down that path, even if we're thinking that we're healthy, right? So whilst you may not have diabetes now, it is better to prevent it. And it's better to understand what is going on in your body, right? So a continuous glucose monitor helps you to understand it better. And so, as the name suggests, continuous glucose monitor, it is a monitor that you'll put into your arm, into the kind of the fat or the muscle behind your arm. and it will continuously monitor your glucose levels in your blood for 2 weeks. Is it the end all be all? No. In the future, do I hope that we'll get to a continuous insulin monitor, which would be a better measure? Yes. But for now, what we've got right now is the ability to measure how much glucose is coursing through our bloodstream. And so the reason why this could be important for you is because you may be eating foods that are spiking that glucose level, which is then causing a spike in insulin, which if this continues over time, prolonged, then it could lead to the diseases I had mentioned in the beginning, right? Diabetes. Also, diabetes is being stated that additional sugar can lead to Alzheimer's, right? Type 3 diabetes, right? So understanding those spikes and then the falls. So if you don't have a continuous glucose monitor, you know that this happens to your body regardless, right? So you have a big meal, and I live in Dominican Republic, rice and beans. What happens after rice and beans? Crash, you have a siesta, right? Potentially not such a big deal if you are moving, if you're burning that off, if you're metabolically flexible. But what happens if you're not moving, if you're not able to burn it off, if you're constantly doing that, if your body is not only getting that glucose from food, but also getting that spike from stress, which is very common, right? A lot of times when my clients will say, well, I didn't have anything in terms of food, but my number shot up. What happened? Well, it could be a workout, it could be a cold shower, or maybe it could be that argument with your partner or your boss, right? And so your body is stressed out. It pumps cortisol to your body. The cortisol releases glucose so that you can, quote unquote, run away from the tiger, but you're only running away from your boss who you just had an argument with, right? And so this glucose monitor, while it can show you which foods are spiking you and crashing, it can also show you other habits that you may be having that may not be so helpful. So from a food perspective, one of the things that I had noticed, which was really interesting, and then because you do these experiments and it's live and it's real time, you can then tweak them. So in my case, I had done an experiment with sushi. I love sushi. If anybody ever wants to take me out for sushi, I'm down to try sushi in any part of the world. Like, let's go. Except that, I don't want to have too much mercury, so I have to be careful. Anyway, we move on.
So stay away from tuna.
Exactly. So I had sushi. So did the normal thing, ordered, had the rolls, had the soy sauce, did the whole thing. It skyrocketed. Christina, it skyrocketed more than a brownie, more than anything. So I was like, all right, well, this is ridiculous. This is not very good for me, despite the fact that it's a healthy food, in air quotes. And so the next day, I did the exact same test, same timing, same roll. This is all for scientific purposes, I swear. And what I changed was that instead of having soy sauce, I used coconut aminos. And what I had also done was I brought a little bit of coconut oil, and I poured the coconut oil onto the sushi. And lo and behold, because I had the oil with the rice, with the coconut aminos instead of the soy sauce, it did have a little bit of a bump. My glucose monitor did have a little bit of a bump. It wasn't completely flatlined, but it was nowhere near. It was nowhere near what it was the night before, right? So if we're aware of these types of things, we can then make these habit changes. And the taste wasn't that big of a difference, wasn't that much of a change for me, right? It wasn't like, oh, well, coconut aminos and soy sauce are effectively the same in my book from a taste profile, right? So these glucose monitors, there's many out there. I had written an article about the differences. There's a couple like Levels, Nutrisense, Very, January. There's a bunch out there now. And historically, you would have had to be a diabetic to get one of these. Now it's on the consumer facing market, just like you guys have, right? I personally really like Very, VERI. And I think my code is Dasha 10 or something like that. I'll send it to you later. But I really like their interface. It makes it very easy for me to use, and it doesn't overcomplicate it. So it's an easy tracker, just kind of like Aura, right? It's both Finnish companies, and the Finns do a great job at keep it simple, give me the information I need, and not more. So yeah, those guys are great.
Amazing. And, with the experimentation that you've done, are there any kind of insights specifically for women's health in terms of glucose monitoring? I was listening to one chat you had with, I think it's Dr. Casey Means, the co-founder of Levels.
Yeah.
And it just kind of blew my mind, the possible relationship between metabolic health and hormones.
Yeah. So I've been playing with these continuous glucose monitors for a while because I'm also curious. I was living in the States and then down here in Dominican Republic. How does my body also change based on where I am? So if I eat a banana up in Boston, for example, versus a banana down here in Dominican Republic, vastly different, right? So everybody in the keto community and is saying, oh, don't have bananas, they're awful. Well, in my case, when I'm down here, I can eat a banana plenty fine and I don't have that spike, right? So I've been testing quite a bit because I'm a nerd. And so one of the things that I have noticed is exactly after ovulation, at the end of your cycle, you are going to have a heightened amount of glucose in your system already. So what does that mean? That means that if you're going to be having, if we're going to be reaching for the sweets and the cookies and the chocolate and all that kind of stuff, because unfortunately that's what we're craving. However, it's probably one of the worst times to do so because your body is already in the second phase. Your body is already heightened in terms of the amount of glucose because of the hormones. Your hormones, the progesterone is saying, okay, let's heighten this, right? And so it's the time of growing. It's the time of holding on. And so it's holding on to the glucose. It's holding on to the fat. And so in reality, if you are to do a glucose monitor the first 2 weeks of your cycle and then the second 2 weeks of your cycle, that for women could be a really interesting test to see, okay, what are the foods that I ate in the beginning of my cycle, same time, same, what kind of try and control for everything and do the exact same thing 2 weeks later. And lo and behold, you will see that your baseline is already heightened. And then maybe what you'll also see is instead of you starting, let's say at 70, you're going to be at 90. I don't know, let's say something like that, right? Maybe it's a smaller uptick. Maybe it's only 78, right? But you will have an uptick. And then maybe the foods that you ate in the first part versus the second part, in the second time, it'll skyrocket you more, right? And your body will hold on to it and not burn it as quickly. So it's just something to think about of, okay, I need to be a little bit more cautious in the second part of my cycle. In the first part, you're actually better off, if you're going to do the cheat, right? Have a cheesecake or whatever it is, you're actually better off to probably do it in the first part of your cycle.
That's super interesting. And any insights kind of around stress? Just kind of a big topic that I wanted to ask you about.
For sure. This topic is very, very, very near and dear to my heart in the past 2 years in particular. And, well, since my last concussion, so 4 years ago. And the reason being because stress is always going to be here. It always will, right? And yet, exactly to your point, we are constantly where stress causes inflammation. Stress causes all of the diseases linked to all the diseases that we have today. But it's not going anywhere. So if it's not going anywhere, we've got to figure out a way to become more resilient to it. Full stop. That is the answer, right? And what I think is fascinating is to see how certain people, certain cultures are more resilient to stress, right? So I come down here, for example, again, Dominican Republic, I'm very, very, very sensitive to noise after having that last concussion. And for me, it is horrendous to be here when motorcycles are going by you and there's noises and honking and the culture is loud and all that kind of stuff. And so I need to become more resilient. And so I think one of the things that we've gotten wrong a little bit is, okay, well, if you're stressed out, you just need to kind of go hide away, right? Or where in the reality, I think it's a twofold answer. I think it's you need to, one, become stronger, you need to become more resilient, and two, you need to know how to decompress, right? So it's a twofold. It's not just I'm going to run away or I'm going to take medication or adaptogens up the wazoo, right? It's no, I'm going to actually grow from this. And so the term post-traumatic growth is one that I've really started actually enjoying, because it's how do I look at this and I say to myself, why is this bothering me so much? Why can't my system handle this? And actually, can it handle this? How do I make it so I can handle this? And so I had a friend, for example, who had a lot of anxiety with strangers, and she forced herself, right? It was very stressful for her to be with strangers or in social situations. And she knew, and she had her own business, and it was halting the growth of her business. And so she said, okay, I've got to get over this. I am stressed out by it. I've got to get over this. So every single day, she would go into a coffee shop, and she would go in and she would make sure, okay, today I have to make small talk. I have to ask the cashier something. I have to ask a question, or I have to sit next to somebody and try and engage in a conversation. And so she grew through the stress, right? She found little ways to get herself to grow out of it. And so I think the question becomes, how do you become more resilient? And then how do you also decompress? And so from a biohacking standpoint, for women, right? Well, women or men, really, but there's a number of different tools to think of. The two that come to mind very, very obviously is one is breath work, which there's so many courses out there. There's so much. I mean, Andrew Huberman talks about it, but breath work is our instant on-off switch for stress, right? The beautiful thing about breath is that whilst it happens very automatically, we don't have to think about it. I don't have to tell myself to breathe, right? It just happens. And yet, I also have the ability to think about the breath and slow it down. So it functions in both sides, right? It's one of the only things. Like, can you tell your hair not to grow? No, you don't have the ability to do that, right? So it's one of the only things that we really can slow down as a process. Could you tell your digestion, I want you to digest faster? No, you can't, right? But breath, we can slow it down. We can speed it up, right? And so if you're in a stressful situation, you can exit the situation, go to the bathroom, and take some deep breaths, right? That is in your power. So when you are stressed out and when everything feels like it's going haywire and you can't control anything, the thing that makes people very, very comfortable is, okay, what can I control? And the thing you can control is your breath. That is the one thing you always have control over, right? And so when we're thinking about stress, and I'll get back to the second tool that I think is interesting. When we think about stress, it's thinking about the different circles, right? So if something is, and it's Tim Ferriss talks about this, but it's your circles of influence, right? Your circle of control, your circle of influence, and your circle of acceptance. So in the case of today, right, we're recording this in the beginning of January 2023, and can I control? I don't know. Can I control the weather tomorrow? No, I cannot control the weather tomorrow. And here it rains and it's sunny. It's rainy and it's sunny. Sometimes the power goes off, right? Now, okay, if that's not in my circle of control, can I next influence? Can I influence the weather? Well, I don't have any way to bust the clouds. I can't really influence it. I can't influence, can I influence that my meetings tomorrow? I can tell them, hey, listen, we've been having some power outages here. Maybe our meeting will be I may be a little late. Maybe, right? So that's my sphere of influence. I can communicate to people, right? And then lastly, in the sphere of acceptance today. So for listeners who are kind of reading between the lines, my power went out. And so I ended up having to be a little late to this podcast with Christina. And the old me would have been like, I'm stressed out. I'm going to disappoint her. This is awful. And there's nothing I can do about it. I can't control it. I can't influence it. So I can just accept it. And so for the time that we didn't have power, I just sat and I meditated and I breathed, because there's nothing else I can do. So I can accept it. I can accept that this is my fate right now, and I'm going to have to apologize, and we may have to reschedule, but I can take that moment and actually use the breath work to calm myself down. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention in terms of, hacks that people can use, there is the breath work, but there's also this idea of the vagus nerve, right? And vagal toning. So the vagus nerve is a superhighway of a nerve that runs down through the column from your cranium to your sacrum, and it innervates and it causes all the other nerves to work, really, right? So it's that massive highway. What they're finding is we need to, just like we go to the gym, we need to tone that vagus nerve. We need to work it out, right? And if we have higher tonality, if it's toned up, then what we find is that people are more resilient to stress. And so, super simple, super easy to do. How do we tone vagus nerve? We hum, we chant, we do jumping jacks, we sing, we dance, we do things that are pleasing to ourselves, right? So when we're thinking about the yogis, the monks, how come they're so not stressed? Besides the fact that they don't have to pay the taxes and do all the things that we do in the modern world, every single day they have something where they're going to the gym for their vagus nerve. They're chanting, they're humming, they're singing, right? So the vagus nerve, if you haven't looked into it and you're into this space, look into it because the science behind it is valid. And it's small little tools and techniques that you can be doing throughout your day, right? You go for a walk with your dog, instead of listening to a podcast, chant, hum. Just hum a song to yourself. Nobody's going to see you or think of it. Like, you don't have to do it loudly, right? You can do it kind of quietly and under your breath, but you are training your stress response.
So powerful. So simple, but also so powerful. Thank you so much. These are really practical tips, and you're a huge inspiration for what you're doing. So I want to just ask, we have a lightning round to kind of finish and close up our episodes. So the first question is, what book do you recommend?
Oh my goodness. There's so many. I should have looked at these questions ahead of time. I could have thought. Rushing Woman Syndrome. Rushing Woman Syndrome, I think, is a great book. And the title is, exactly that. Rushing Woman Syndrome would be that's the one that pops into my mind right now. It talks about exactly what many women are doing today. We're rushing around. We think that when we do more, we're going to give more. And in truth, it's not, it's the farthest thing from the truth. So that would be one that I would recommend. I really, on a, nothing to do with health, but just a beautiful book to read is Many Lives, Many Masters. It's more on the woo-woo side of things, but it kind of pulls me. Often I'm in the science and I'm reading business books and things like that, right? This pulls me out of that. And it talks about potential lives, right? Afterlives, previous lives that we could have had outside of this life that we're living today. And it makes me think bigger. So even if you don't believe in reincarnation or in ghosts or in souls,
past lives,
yeah, it was written by a Harvard-trained doctor, like a medical doctor, a medical psychiatrist, and then all of a sudden his world exploded into other realms. But yeah, those are two books that quickly come to mind.
Amazing. I will check that one out. And the next question is, who do you really admire? I know you work with tons of doctors and experts. If you could mention kind of a few, who do you really admire in the field, who we should probably interview?
Oh my goodness. There are so many. Dr. Nasha Winters comes to mind first. She's just incredible. She's a mentor. She taught me a lot, and she was diagnosed with cancer when she was 19, and she said, "Nope, that's not going to be my future." And she now is running and starting the first integrative oncology hospital, which is including things not just the standard care, but also incorporating marijuana, incorporating mistletoe, incorporating a lot of these different biohacks which to me is amazing, right? I love her approach of thinking about the newness of health and where it can go. It could be the peptides, it could be stem cells, it could be all of these forefront thinking technologies. And then she doesn't forget about the old, right? She doesn't forget that there is such wisdom in the plants, in the herbs, in the terpenes that we used to always have in our foods, in our rosemary and our sage and all that kind of things, and those things, right? And so I love that she's bridging the gap, and she, in my opinion, is somebody that I'm always infected with her energy in a positive way, right? And I'm admired with how her brain works.
Amazing. Yeah, a lot of those things you mentioned are pretty potent, and have a lot of science behind them. And the next question I'd love to ask about, there's so much information of varying quality on social media about health, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish kind of the quality of the information and really how impactful recommendations are. So what for you is like a really overvalued topic these days in health? And then on the flip side of that, what is an undervalued topic?
How do you mean overvalued?
Overvalued in the sense that we talk about it a lot, and maybe its impact is minimal or not as much in proportion to how much it's talked about.
Fair. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Just wanted to make sure I got that clear. Nutrition. I think we talk way too much about nutrition. It's just, everybody's fighting. Everybody. Is it keto? Is it carnivore? Is it vegan? Is it vegetarian? Is it pescatarian? Is it, are oils good or sugar's bad? It's like, come on, people, right? At the end of the day, our cells do not distinguish between, are you vegan? Are you not? Right. And it becomes this huge thing, and it's your identity, and you have to fight for it. And then all of a sudden, if you've decided to go from carnivore to something else, then you're a fraud. Right. And so I think nutrition is incredibly important. It's critical. You cannot, if you have a bad environment in your body and you're eating ho-hos and drinking a lot of alcohol and doing all the things, and you're giving your cells the wrong signal, then yes, you're not doing anything good for your health. Full stop. That being said, if we are so hyper we're annoying about it, right? We make it this big thing and we become so stressed about it. And so I think what ends up happening is that this nutrition thing has actually led to people being too stressed. And because they're freaked out and they don't know what they're doing wrong, and they've therefore then forgotten the intuition of their body, right? And so when I say to somebody, oh, well, they're like, oh yeah, well, I've been constantly feeling bloated. Okay, well, have you figured out what that is? Have you noticed a pattern? No. I don't notice a pattern. I'm vegan. That's who I am. Or I'm carnivore. That's who I am. Or whatever it is, right? And so we've forgotten the intuition of your body is giving you a signal. You don't need, yes, these tests are important. Yes, you could do a gut microbiome test. Yes, you can do all of these things, but your body is beautiful. It's beautiful, and it is telling you, right? And so, yes, it may take a little bit of time, but if you cut out eggs, for example, for 2 weeks, and then you start feeling better, maybe eggs was the thing, right? And so I think we've just gotten too much on nutrition. I think the thing that we probably don't speak enough about, and I'm going to say two things in this case. One, I don't think that we understand everything that Nikola Tesla was talking about enough, because it's too tough for us, right? It's above our heads and we don't understand it. But what I mean by that is we don't understand vibration and frequency enough. And that is critical for our bodies. It's critical for our cells, our mitochondria, quantum, everything. It's critical, right? And so oftentimes, the easiest way for people to understand that is with grounding, right? And, oh, okay, well, when do you feel the best in health, right? When you're sleeping really well, when you're on vacation, on the beach, walking barefoot, right? Or in the summer, you're running around with your kids at, at the lake house or in the park, right? And you're barefoot, right? And in the wintertime, we don't do that because it's cold and I'm not going to take off my shoes, right? But then we're constantly around computers, or around computers during the day for work, we're around them at night, we're on our phones, we're constantly just sucking our bodies dry, dehydrating our bodies because of all the electromagnetic fields, right? And then we're sleeping in bedrooms that are not grounded. We're not wearing shoes that are grounded. So when we think about health, one thing that I think we're missing a lot is frequency and vibration. And what is that doing to our cells and our bodies and our health? Even to the extent of sound, right? Sound is a frequency. We have Amp Coil, for example, great company that is using sound to heal, right? Could, some people are like, oh, that's completely woo-woo. Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. When you're around really horrible sounds, like screeching sounds and all that sound, what does your body do? You kind of clench in, you try and protect, you try and pull away from it, right? Instead of opening up. When you listen to something that's pleasing to you, like on a Sunday morning, you throw on Spotify, you throw on your favorite playlist, right? Jazz or whatever it is. And you're like, you're feeling yourself. You feel good. It's good frequency. It's good vibration. And lastly is, I think the thing that's missing or that we don't pay enough attention to is the focus is how our health is impacted by how we feel with those around us. And so what I mean by that is people talk about toxic relationships and people talk about, all of that, but they never actually make the link with your health. They never make the link of, okay, those people who have a really bad boss, if you look at their labs, nobody's done this experiment, so we don't actually know, but I would venture to guess that their labs are not going to be that great, right? I had a toxic work relationship and my health plummeted, completely plummeted, right? And so when we're thinking about, it's like, what are the things that is surrounding you? So it's not just the nutrition, it's not just the frequency of, it's also the frequency of the people. It's the frequency of, you have somebody who comes into your life and they're throwing negativity at you. Remember, we have the micro joys, but we also, if they're throwing negativity at you, you need to have 7 times positivity to offset that, right? So if they're throwing negativity at you, no matter how many supplements you're taking, you're not going to exactly do well, right? So we think about divorce from a toxic relationship. Well, that divorce doesn't only have to be a romantic relationship. It could also be if you have somebody in your family who is toxic, and okay, fine, you don't want to completely cut them off. We need to learn how to set boundaries. We need to learn how to be able to say no so that they're not entering into that sphere. And I mean, it's like they're throwing darts at you, right? It's like the equivalent of them pouring acid onto you. You wouldn't let them do that. Why are you letting them do that energetically, right? So those are things that I wish that we could get to a better state to quantify those types of things. And I think we are getting closer to that when we think about, like, again, a continuous glucose monitor. You can start seeing how stress is impacting you, how a potential negative interaction with an individual is impacting you. You can also see that in your HRV. You can see that in your breathing patterns, right? Is my breathing getting shallower? Or when I'm around somebody, I'm open, I'm fun, I'm light, I'm flexible, right? So yeah, think about that and see if there are maybe individuals who are throwing that negativity to you and whether that is serving you.
Yeah, so profound, Dasha. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how aligned I am with everything you just explained. I actually have my amp coil in that closet.
Nice.
And it's funny, like I went on my own health journey as well, and I would see in my case, but also in other people, that they were really sick with XYZ, and then they changed their job or they separated from their partner and things just fell into place and they got better. And I don't think we talk about that enough. So thank you. I really appreciate that for you presencing that, and yeah, super profound. I feel like I could chat with you for hours, and I hope we can do that when I come visit in Dominican Republic on one of your epic retreats. We can put the show notes information about that as well. But I was so grateful for having you on today on the podcast. Just incredible tips for people to check out, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. So I love everything that you're doing. So I want to appreciate you and thank you for coming on today. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention or talk about to our listeners before we wrap up?
Maybe just that you say I'm a wealth of knowledge, and my knowledge is only because I'm standing on other people's shoulders, right? And I think that is the beauty of this health space, that we can all learn from each other. I really like the idea of co-healing, right? We all are able to be healers for each other. And so whilst you might be going to a doctor and thinking that they're going to heal you, it could be that you now have some information that you can teach them, right? You can help heal them. Maybe they haven't heard about this information of biohacking or whatever it is. And similarly, like I've learned from your story is just, speechless, right? Of the trials and tribulations and where you've come out to, right? And so I think this idea of, this guru and student, or, that somebody is not better than you, but, has more. I don't necessarily believe that, right? We all have so much that we can learn from each other. And so we can all be co-healing and all be learning from each other. And I really love that that's where this biohacking space is when it's in the good space, right? When we can put aside the egos and we can say, okay, well, even if the science says this, right? If I'm feeling that, then that's your truth, right? That's your reality. And maybe your reality is similar to somebody else's. And so we just keep on sharing. And science and health is that. It's a constant evolution to figure out what works for you. So thank you again for having me on this. It's a joy to speak with you. And if anybody wants to contact me, _Dash of Health on Instagram. And I'm always eager to kind of share the information that's been given to me, because the more that people know, the more it ripples out to others.
Amazing. Well, Dasha, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation and collaborating in the future. And again, thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.